verse 33, he said, if only I had died in your place. He wanted to die in the place of his rebellious son, but he couldn't. Now here's the glorious news, right? What David could not do, God did by dying in the place of rebellious sinners. The same anguished love that David has for Absalom, in a pure way, in a sinless way, it is the love that God has for us. And he says, oh, that I could die in their place. In this cry of David, we actually hear an echo of the cry of God for his lost children, his desire to restore them, his desire to forgive them. And he says, I'll do it by dying in their place. That's the great message of the gospel, isn't it? He's brought back rebels and traitors just like us. People who haven't restrained their passions. People who haven't followed in submission to our King. He brings us back. And he did it by dying in our place. We're going to conclude tonight with a few verses from chapter 19, because it flows along very well in the context. Verse 1, and Joab was told, behold, the king is weeping and mourning for Absalom. So the victory that day was turned into mourning for all the people. For the people heard it said that day, the king is grieved for his son. And the people stole back into the city that day as people who are ashamed steal away when they flee in battle. Friends, this is not good. I mean, did you read that line there in verse 2? The victory that day was turned into mourning for all the people. I mean, David had loyal supporters, sacrificing supporters, and they won the day for the glory of God and for the good of Israel and for the safety of their king. And now they feel bad about their victory because David is overcome with excessive weeping and mourning for Absalom. And might I say, right here, there is a such thing as excessive mourning. There's a such thing as mourning that is basically rooted in unbelief and in self-indulgence. And friends, again, we do not expect Christians to be stoic. And a loved one dies and well, don't mourn, brother. No, there is an appropriate grief. There is an appropriate mourning. But I would say that by anybody's measure, David has overstepped that which is appropriate here. And he has given himself over to excessive mourning, to an ungodly grief. Remember what Paul warned Christians in 1 Corinthians 4:13. He says, I don't want you to be ignorant, brethren, concerning those who have fallen asleep, lest you sorrow as others who have no hope. That's how David is sorrowing. And some Christians sorrow in times of death or in times of tragedy. And they sorrow just like people who have no hope in God. And that's wrong to do. What a disgraceful testimony that is of our Lord. Listen to what Charles Spurgeon said. He said, if your dear ones are dead, you cannot restore them to life by your unbelief. And if they still survive, it will be a pity to be downcast and unbelieving while there's no occasion for it. Your strength is to sit still. Remember that you're a Christian, and a Christian is expected to be more self-possessed than those who have no God to find refuge in. And so the people there, well, they were ashamed. David put that upon them by his excessive mourning. He made his loyal friends and supporters feel ashamed that they won a great victory. Well, as you might expect, Joab is having none of this. Verse 4. But the king covered his face, and the king cried out with a loud voice, oh, my son Absalom! Oh, Absalom, my son, my son. Can you see this? Can you hear it echoing through the city of Jerusalem? People can hear this king almost shrieking, echoing off the stone walls of the palace. David crying, pacing back and forth, undone as a king, given over to this excessive mourning, this excessive grief. Verse 5, then Joab came into the house of the king, and he said, Today you have disgraced your servants, and who today have saved your life, the lives of your sons and your daughters, the lives of your wives and the lives of your concubines, in that you love your enemies and you hate your friends. For you have declared today that you regard neither princes nor servants. For today I perceive that if Absalom had lived, and if all of us have died today, then it would have pleased you well. Now therefore arise, go out and speak comfort to your servants, for I swear by the Lord, if you do not go out, not one will stay with you this night, and that will be worse for you than with all the evil that has befallen you from your youth until now. Wow. That's it's interesting to read the older commentators. They all say this. They say, especially the British commentators, they say, well, Joab was absolutely correct, but no one should speak that way to their king. This high vision of royalty that they have. Because, man, I'll tell you, Joab was direct. He just comes into David, and he says, forget it, man. This ends now. Friends, David couldn't stop singing that song, "Oh, my son Absalom, oh, Absalom, my son, my son." He was locked into excessive mourning and a lack of perspective. He was mastered by his feelings, and our feelings were never meant to master us. And friends, let me be very clear on this point. God is not against feelings, not at all. We're not out campaigning for some kind of stone-faced, stiff-upper-lip Christianity where you never get too happy or you never get too sad. Forget about that nonsense. God is not against feelings. And many Christians have a great lack in their Christian life. They lack deep and profound feeling and experience in their walk with God. However, nevertheless, we can say at the same time that feelings were never meant to master over us. And that's where David's at. He's completely mastered by his feelings. And let me tell you that the problem was not in what David knew. Absalom's tragic death and David's own role in it, David knew all about that, and that's okay. But David's problem was in what he forgot. Yeah, he knew all about Absalom's death. He knew all about his role in it, and it grieved him to no end. But what David has forgotten is just as big. He's forgotten that God's in control. He's forgotten that a great victory was won. He's forgotten that he has many loyal supporters. He forgot that God showed great grace and mercy to David. When you see somebody who's overcome in tragedy or sorrow, the problem isn't in what they know. The problem is in what they forget. Oh, they see their problem crystal clear. Well, how do they see their problem? What they don't see is they don't see the hand of God and the love of God all around them. And so, what a wake-up call Joab gives to David. David, your excessive mourning is selfish. It's all about you. These loyal, sacrificial supporters of you deserve to feel good about their victory, and you're making them feel terrible about it. You snap out of it. Boy, did you catch that line that Joab laid on him in verse 6? That if Absalom would have lived and all of us would have died, it would have pleased you well. How about that, David? That's sharp truth, and it's delivered with precision. Joab wanted David to see that not only he was being selfish, he was being foolish. And so he says, you go out there now, and you speak encouragement to the team. They deserve it. And if you don't, you're going to lose them all, and you're going to deserve to lose them. I imagine then Joab turning on his heels and walking out. And David's left at one of those moments that leaders are left with. Joab, again, a complex guy. You hate to put a stamp of approval on a guy like Joab because he's just, man, there's an awful lot of good, there's an awful lot of bad there in a man like Joab. But this was good. Let me tell you, David needs a Joab in a place like this. David needs a Joab who will come in and just say, you're full of it, man. Have you thought about this and this and this? And then he'll say, now you make the decision, and walks out of the room. And leaders need people like that. They really do. I thank God for people in my life who have been like that. It's not the most comfortable thing in the world, but it doesn't take you much perspective at all to see that this is a blessing from God. You need it. Every leader needs somebody to look them square in the eye and say, what, are you kidding me? You better run this by me again, because it's not adding up. Yeah, and so here he hears it, and David is left alone there in the throne room, or at least in the way I picture it, and he just thinks for a few moments, and he goes, you know what, he's right. He's absolutely right.